Tiago Henrique Gomes da Rocha. The case of Tiago da Rocha is a sad one that will definitely stir anger in anyone who hears it. Tiago's story is one of a shy young boy who grew up to become a cold and heartless killer that killed based on whims. In today's video, we'll be looking at the case of Tiago da Rocha, or the motorcycle killer, as he was called all over Brazil. My name is Zach, and you are watching Crime Origin. Tiago Henrique Gomes da Rocha, also known as Manic Goiânia, was born on the 4th of February 1988 to a single mother and an absentee father. Rocha recalled never seeing or even knowing his father, as he abandoned the family before he was born. Tiago was raised by his mother and grandparents, who were the most present source of parenting he had, as his mother was rarely around. She worked multiple jobs and would leave early in the morning, only to return home late in the evening. Tiago's grandparents did all they could to raise young Tiago to the best of their ability, but even they couldn't stop the string of unfortunate events that would plague the little boy's childhood. When Tiago's mom started seeing another man, she became even more absent in his life. In fact, she was never around. As a result, Tiago was left by himself a lot, and this opening was what a sick neighbor needed to carry out his nefarious activities. In a nutshell, this neighbor would sexually abuse Tiago whenever his mom wasn't at home, and as we've established, this was a lot. Young Tiago was being violated in his own home and didn't feel safe. The only place where he would have felt some semblance of safety was at school, and even that didn't work out because his classmates constantly bullied him at school for being shy and quiet. The bullying was so bad at some point, Tiago expressed desires to stop going to school altogether, but of course, he didn't really get his wish. Going on to high school, Tiago thought his bullying phase was finally over and that he would have a somewhat normal school experience from here on out, but even that proved difficult. At some point, Tiago began feeling attracted to both girls and boys and was having a hard time articulating his feelings. He would recall feeling anxious whenever he tried to talk to girls, a feeling that would quickly turn to anger when they eventually laughed at him and turned him down. The anger got so bad that he ended up being even more reclusive and would lash out at anyone who even remotely talked to him in the wrong way. Tiago still lived with his mother for much of his early adult life and occasionally brought back a date or two. His girlfriend would later testify in his trial to explain that he was a loving boyfriend who had treated her with love and respect. As an adult, Tiago had a more open personality, with people recalling him being quiet and friendly, and not the kind of person you would expect to commit the kinds of heinous murders he would go on to commit. With a tall frame and kind face, Tiago landed jobs pretty easily, which were mostly in security. He worked for different firms and shopping centers for a few years before landing his last job prior to being arrested. His last job was working as a security guard at a children's hospital, and the staff all reported that he was a pretty quiet guy who came in, did his rounds, and left when his shift was over. The hiring manager noted that Tiago went through a rigorous hiring process and passed with flying colors. Regardless, he only worked at this children's hospital for less than 2 months before he was eventually arrested for his crimes, which meant he had already killed people and was still actively killing while watching over a hospital full of children. The first murders. As far as the police who investigated the case know, there was no set point or triggering event in Tiago's life where he snapped and instantly started killing. Tiago himself revealed during his interrogation that he didn't recall having a triggering instance right before he committed the murders, only a burning desire and urge to kill. He revealed that when he began killing, he had no particular preference or discrimination amongst his victims. He stated that he simply picked at random, depending on who he met after thinking about killing for days on end. Tiago began killing sometime in 2011. And his method of killing was really disturbing and peculiar, to say the least. After a night of drowning himself in alcohol for some liquid courage, he would get on his motorcycle and proceed to do the most bizarre thing before killing his victims. He would ride up to the victim yelling "robbery" before proceeding to pull out an automatic weapon, which he would use to shoot his victim at point-blank range. After the murder, Tiago would flee the scene of the crime, but not until after he had stolen a license plate to replace his motorcycle plates so that he couldn't be traced. To show that Tiago didn't kill for any other reason beyond the fact that he was a cold psychopath, he didn't take any valuables from his victims. He didn't take money or jewelry that would have been an easy steal at that point. Tiago's very first victim was a man who he recalled having little memory of during his interrogation. He only remembered having a lot to drink that night before getting on a motorcycle, driving to a nearby highway, and shooting the first guy he found alone on the street. This unidentified man would go on to be the first of many that would fall prey to Tiago's depraved appetite for killing. As he would later reveal, Tiago didn't have any selection process when it came to his victims, as he would normally just kill the person that felt right to die at his hands that day. But contrary to this, there was an obvious pattern in his choice of victims, even if he didn't want to admit it. He would normally target young women who were mostly alone or around secluded areas at the time of the murders. And he would also target homeless people as well as cross-dressers and gay people. I guess even killers have a fear of being seen as misogynistic or homophobic. Other victims. After his first victim, Tiago would go on to kill several other men, mostly using the same motorcycle and fake robbery charade. After this, he eventually turned his attention to young women who were unlucky enough to be just where they were at the time Tiago decided to go on a killing spree. His first female victim happened to be a 14-year-old girl named Barbara Costa. The murder took place on January 18th, 2013, under textbook Tiago scenarios. Little Barbara had just closed from school and was waiting for her grandmother to get off work at a public bus stop. Tiago was on the prowl that evening for his next victim when he spotted Barbara sitting by herself at the bus stop and decided she was the one. Tiago rode up to Barbara on his motorcycle and shot her point blank in the chest before leaving instantly without stealing anything. Still high from the rush of just killing 14-year-old Barbara the previous day, Tiago decided he hadn't had enough and was on the prowl for another victim the very next day. Again, he spotted another woman walking by her lonesome and didn't hesitate in making her his next victim. 23-year-old Beatriz Mora was shot and killed by Tiago not up to 24 hours after he killed 14-year-old Barbara. Once again, he fled the scene of the crime without stealing anything. Tiago didn't stop with his initial victims and went on to kill more women. Seemingly fearless at the thought of getting caught or arousing suspicion, Tiago killed a total of 15 different women in the city of Goiânia. His victim pool was made up of mainly young women aged between 14 and 29. Among the women, 2 would later be identified to be prostitutes, with the rest being either students or working-class women. In one particular case, Tiago physically assaulted a woman and proceeded to shoot her in the foot just because she didn't compliment him on his good looks. Investigations and arrest. The alarming number of bodies Tiago had been stacking up from 2011 to 2014 finally caught the attention of the Brazilian police. Soon, they opened an investigation into the case. With all his drive-by shooting at bus stops and streets, the police had images of Tiago from security cameras. The images showed him holding an assault rifle, and he appeared to always be on his motorcycle. On the 14th of August, 2014, after the murder of 14-year-old Ana Gomes, a task force was set up for the sole purpose of catching Tiago, who was dubbed the motorcycle killer. Unfortunately for Tiago, he already had an exciting brush with the law back in 2013, as he was arrested for using a stolen license plate on his motorcycle. On the 14th of October, Tiago was arrested for using a stolen license plate. Little did the arresting officer know that he had the motorcycle killer in custody. After he was identified, the task force was alerted, and he was immediately transferred to the homicide department, where he was interrogated. Interrogation. The police knew Tiago was a serial killer, one that was responsible for some drive-by shootings and some murders. But what they didn't know or expect was for 26-year-old Tiago to confess to killing 39 people. What was equally shocking was that the same day he was apprehended, he tried to kill another woman but failed in his attempt when his gun jammed and didn't go off. He was caught with knives, a hammer, and handcuffs in his possession at the time of his arrest. During the interrogation, Tiago told the detectives that he was moved by a greater power to commit the crimes and that he regrets the crimes. Detectives who interrogated him stated that his demeanor during questioning was very bizarre. He would describe a crime and would immediately bury his face in his hands in a somewhat catatonic state, seemingly out of shame and shock at his actions. When he was asked about the murders, he would refer to his victims only as with numbers, number 15, number 26, things like that. Officers were shocked at his coldness and the sheer disregard for human life, just to gratify a feeling he had. Officers stated that he described each crime with so much detail and excitement that they wondered if what he said about regretting his actions was true. While describing his crimes, he told police that he was reliving each moment in his mind and would occasionally smile in between sentences. Tiago's lawyer, Tiago Vidal, stated that he reminded his client of his right to remain silent, but Tiago was insistent on talking, stating, "I have to get this out of me." The lawyer revealed that at first he thought his client, Tiago, was pressured by the police, but when he heard for himself how he described each crime with so much detail and accuracy, he was equally shocked. After being reprimanded in jail and awaiting trial, Tiago attempted suicide with a broken light bulb, but was intercepted by guards before he bled out. He was put on suicide watch. Conviction. In May of 2016, Tiago Henrique Gomes da Rocha was convicted on 11 of the 39 murders and sentenced to 343 years in prison. Even while in prison, Tiago still has the urge to kill, as they have reported him asking if he could kill other inmates. The case of Tiago da Rocha is a sad and bitter one. On the one hand, we have a man who has pent-up anger issues with a history of sexual assault, and on the other, we have a grown man who made the conscious decision to kill innocent people out of sheer desire. Justice was served in this case, but it still begs the question, would he have turned out the same if he wasn't molested?